While you may have had the talk with your children when they were teenagers, there's another conversation that parents need to have as they get older. It's the talk about moving to a retirement community. What makes this talk difficult is that many adult children can be initially uncomfortable about their parents' decision to step up to a new lifestyle. Away from the family home, in a setting where the desires of older adults are met. And with a move, this signifies that they're getting older. With us today is Carol Ann McCormick, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Duncaster, a community in Bloomfield, Connecticut. Carol Ann has worked in senior housing for over 20 years. Welcome, Carol Ann.
Thank you.
First of all, we know that once someone is trying to wrestle with this decision and they make that decision, they really want to share this with their adult children. Why is this such a difficult conversation to have?
Because it's the beginning of role reversal.
Ah.
Okay? So you've been the go-to person for your children for years and years, and now with a move that's significant, it starts to cause the minds in your adult children thinking about your aging.
Ah.
And they've never really thought about that. But now you're talking about a different phase in your life, and so it brings the whole topic of your own aging into the minds of your children, probably for the first time.
So does that explain why some adult children are resistant to the idea of that kind of a move?
That's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a very, very big part of it. The resistance comes sometimes, not with every child, but sometimes there are pieces of your life that your children may feel they will miss. So Thanksgiving at the lake house, that has happened every year. They start wondering, will that still happen? Or, goodness, we've all been living in this house for 45 years. It's not just your parents' house. You feel like it's your house, too.
I see.
So if they're going to be selling the house as part of that move, then you may resist because you feel like it's your house they're selling.
So how do you begin?
You need to have some frank conversations and let your children know what's been happening with your life that's making you starting to consider a lifestyle that can be very different.
So do we assume that all adult children are going to be uncomfortable with this?
No, they won't. Some may jump for joy.
Why?
Well, I actually did when my own mother decided to move to a community, and I did it because I knew that in the coming years I wouldn't have to worry about her as much as I would if she were still in a house. I wouldn't have to worry about having your parents climbing on a ladder cleaning the gutters. Many people are fierce about their independence, not realizing that independence doesn't mean you have to get on a ladder. You can be independent by merely calling somebody to get on that ladder for you and paying a handyman. But children really sometimes can have a tough time seeing their parents start to change and becoming less maybe physically strong that they used to see them. Or maybe the parents are just becoming wiser and wanting to have a better lifestyle than they currently have.
So when a parent is going to look around for options, should they include their adult children at that stage, or when should they include them?
I think it depends. If you're somebody who is looking and you think you may be moving as a relocation to be near your adult children, maybe your adult children could do some of the legwork for you if you live in a different state. However, you're the one that's going to be living at the community. So you want to make sure that the community is amenable to you. Does it have the features and benefits you're looking for? Do you feel like you fit? Do you like it there? Did you have a sense of, wow, I could live here as soon as you drove onto the property?
It's like looking at a college.
Very much like looking at a college. So if it's something that is in your territory, then you may want to definitely be the one looking. And then when you're narrowing down your choices, maybe one or two places left, then bring your children in to see what their thoughts are they may have some insight or wonder about something that you didn't yet think about.
When it comes to this kind of a move, how do you present it? I mean, your children may focus on what they're giving up, the house on the lake, Thanksgiving. How do you overcome that?
Sometimes children don't realize that certain components of life can start to become a ball and chain.
A ball and chain?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, think about
the
it.
Thanksgiving and the lake house?
That can be, but if you have the lake house and you have your other house, you're actually managing two properties. And you may really want some time for yourself or more enjoyment. Sometimes things that you once got a great deal of enjoyment out, like maybe gardening or raking, or even painting rooms, can become more cumbersome. You know, or maybe your interests change and you're not as much into gardening as you were when you were raising your children because you had to be around the house anyway.
Yes.
You know, maybe now you don't want to spend so much time gardening because you'd rather spend more time exploring, you know, the world around you.
So what I'm hearing you say is don't talk about what you're giving up. Talk about what you're getting.
Oh, yeah, definitely, definitely. If you're, you know, trading in a hoe to be able to, you know, to come and go and you've always wanted to visit all 50 states, you can't do that if you've got a big garden to take care of back home.
How do you know if a place is right for you? You mentioned a little bit about feeling good as soon as you walk on the campus, but how do you even know?
Interesting, Loyola University did a study many years ago, probably within the last decade, about people entering college campuses, and before they even went into the buildings or met a person, they had a sense as this is where I want to go to school.
Definitely. We found that with my son.
And I've had many people tell me when they drive up to Duncaster that when they drove to the property, they just felt like, wow, this is really bucolic, and I could live here.
Can you try it out? I mean, are there should you meet people who live there? I mean, it's a big decision.
Yeah, it's a huge decision. So you do want to meet people who live in the community. Ask them. They'll know what it's like to go through the move.
Yes.
And they'll know what it's like to have had these conversations with their children. But it's always, you know, you need to meet with people who work at the community to get the business end of the move. But you also want to talk with people who live in the community to feel like, oh gosh, you know, are these people I would like to be my future neighbors?
For older adults, there's always a sense of saying, well, I'm not ready now. When things start to go wrong, then I'll think about it. But I'm not ready now.
Well, somebody who's ready to talk to their adult children is ready. And ready doesn't mean the move itself, because there's a lot of planning that has to go into it, and time. You know, moves don't happen usually within a year or two. You're going to be, you know, you're going to be scoping things out first. So you really want to start talking with your children before you're ready.
Oh.
You're going to possibly want some of their help. And you also are going to want time for them to understand what you're picking, where you're picking, and why.
How do you get over the idea that they have certain assumptions about what aging is going to be? What a move like this is going to mean for them? I mean, how do you get over that?
Well, a lot of it is conversation, making sure you're assuring them that they're still going to be part of your life. And it can be odd because as people get older, instead of the child needing them, sometimes the parent needs the child a little bit. So that's where, you know, you're really starting to switch roles midway through life. You know, when you think about a 50-year-old, their parent might now be 70 or 75.
Right.
You know, and think about when you were 25, that same parent was only 50. So you're starting to move into the shoes that your parents had for yourself and for them.
How do you do you need them to buy into the decision?
It would probably be very nice for family harmony, but it's your life and your decision. So if you are looking at it and seeing that there are going to be certain benefits that you're ready for now and that you want in the near future, in the next 2, 3, 5 years, then, you know, it's just like if you're buying a stock and your child didn't like the stock pick you had, would you still not buy it? If you had done your research and were certain that that was the right stock to buy, you'd probably still buy it.
Right. Okay, that's an interesting analogy.
It is.
Give us 3 what not to do's when it comes to the talk.
Do not put the decision on your children.
Okay.
That's probably the worst thing that you could do. I think most people don't want to burden their children, so don't
Okay.
put the decision on them. Do the research yourself and share with them the results of your research.
Okay.
Okay. I think don't spring it on them if you're going to be moving next year. If you already have a place in mind and you're already working through the process, you may want to tell them slightly before you begin the process.
So don't spring it on them is rule number 2.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I think the third thing when you're having the talk, let them know that they're not going to be having to do everything for you for the move.
Because they may see this as another thing they have to do for you.
They may see it as a big chore.
Okay.
Especially if your attic is terribly full or your basement is overflowing, you can't park the car in the garage. Maybe share with them that you would like their help, but maybe in finding a professional that can help you with this. Or maybe you want their help in just, if there's anything in this house that you want, take it this month or next month, because after that, we're having arrangements made. But let them know that they're not going to be overcome with manual labor for your move.
So give us, as a wrap-up, give us 3 big ideas that we should be taking with us. Big pieces of advice. I've made this decision. I want to do this. Give me 3 big pieces of advice going into this on the talk.
Okay. Be very open and honest. So if you have a heartfelt reason why you're doing this, that you really, really feel like the house owns you and you don't own the house anymore, let your kids know.
Okay.
Okay? They may not realize, the changes that you're going through. If you lie awake at night worrying about what's going to happen to you 10 years from now or 15 years from now if something happens to your spouse,
Tell them that.
tell them that.
It's going to upset them, though.
But it's part of planning.
Okay.
People plan for so many things in life. They plan to have children. They plan their weddings. They plan graduation parties. They plan career moves. Plan for the last 25 years of your life. Don't let it just happen, because then you'll be a victim of circumstance.
That sounds like a really big idea. Mm-hmm. Anything else that we should know about jumping into the talk with our children?
I think don't be afraid to do it. It's you kind of owe it to each other as a family. You've raised them, you've raised your children, you want them to be independent. And now it might be your turn to seek a little bit more independence than your current lifestyle has for you.
Terrific. Interesting. So if someone needs more information about this, where should they go?
Well, they can visit the Duncaster website, duncaster.org, or they could call me at Duncaster if they wish.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much. This has been a really helpful talk about the talk. Thank you for joining us. For adult children, initiating the conversation with their parents about the move to a retirement community is awkward. For many children, starting the conversation may be the toughest challenge because they have trouble coming to terms with their parents' aging. It's especially true for those adults who notice changes in their parents' lifestyle that concern them. With us today to offer tips about the difficult conversation that this entails is Carol Ann McCormick, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Duncaster, a community in Bluefield, Connecticut. She has worked for over 20 years nationwide in senior housing. Carol Ann, you've already talked about the idea of bringing up this issue with your adult children. How's this conversation different?
It's the flip side. Typically, when it's time to talk to your parents about a change in their lifestyle, it's because they're having problems. So they have not been in a position, or maybe their judgment is waning, or perhaps they're just scared, but they have not made plans for themselves, so now you as the adult child are intervening and stepping in.
So how do you start that conversation?
It has to be very honest.
Honest.
Very honest, yes. You may start it with something like an icebreaker, like, Dad, I've noticed that for the last, season, your shrubs really haven't been kept up to par.
So
as
just
they
an
have been in the
observation.
past. Yep. You may start to notice things, but bring up to your parents what you're observing.
Okay.
So you're saying, the shrubs at the house here, aren't trimmed like they usually are. It seems like the lawn, needs a little bit of maintenance. Tell me what's going on.
That's very not judgmental. Tell me what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good way to start that conversation?
Yes, you want to start it with observations. And maybe these observations, you've noticed them for quite some time and have been afraid to say something yourself.
When is the right time to do this?
The sooner, the better. If you're noticing that your mother, father, or both of them are starting to have maybe challenges in their day-to-day, and something like lawn maintenance, yard maintenance is certainly a symptom of a challenge, you want to bring it up. You don't want to wait for a crisis, or you don't want to wait till they have further decline in their ability or their help, their health or what. So it's really never too soon. Maybe there's just something, short term going on. Maybe they're lawn boy. Maybe they haven't been able to find a reliable lawn boy, and maybe you didn't even know they had one for the past 5 years. But maybe it's just that, and your dad cannot do it anymore.
Give us some examples of some other clues that might say to me, I might not want to do this, but it's probably time for me to do.
Well, some things that are maybe a little bit more drastic are when you go to see your parents and you notice that their refrigerator really doesn't have anything very healthful in it.
Okay.
Or maybe it's a little on the empty side. It could be sometimes your parents maybe even giving you some little clues, like, oh gosh, I just can't keep up the house like I used to, or gosh, it sure is a pain. I can't run up and down the stairs with the laundry like I did 10 years ago.
So they may give you clues.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they may. Because when you think about it, getting older is something each of us does only once. We don't have any prior experience.
You don't have any prior experience.
So, sometimes you just don't know what to do or where to turn when changes start coming to you.
So when I see those changes in my parents, should I just take over the process?
Depends on how bad the changes are.
Okay.
So if your parent truly isn't eating well and they're forgetful, and you're noticing that the prescription jars lined up along the counter have expiration dates on them from 2 years ago, you need to step in immediately. But there are other times when maybe you just need to start opening conversations and being a guiding hand and being a resource.
So do you involve them at that point? Is it better to do that?
You need to involve them all the time, but the degree to which you need to involve them is going to vary depending on whether they can be mentally involved or not.
So if I'm approaching my parents, should I already say, I've looked at 5 communities and these are the 5?
Again, that's kind of a loaded question. You want to start the conversations before you start looking at communities.
Okay.
But you don't want to delay looking at communities for your parents.
Okay.
Or an alternate, it may not even be a community. Maybe it's just some type of help that they need. But you really don't want to delay it, because a delay can result in an accident, an injury, a crisis. So you want to start working with your parents. If they seem to not be making sound decisions, or resistant, or hiding, then you may want to be the pusher. You don't have to push them over, but you may need to start parenting your parent.
Wow. One of the biggest things that kept me from having this conversation is the thought of what's in that house. The overwhelming idea of getting rid of everything that's in a house that my parents have lived in for 30 years. That just seems like the biggest hurdle. How do you get over that?
If you can, call in the troops, bring in the cavalry. If you have siblings,
Yes.
and there is, much more to changing your parents' lifestyle than just making a decision about something. Then there's the, is there physical labor involved? But there are professionals out there.
There are people that will help with this?
Oh goodness, yes. You can. There are professionals who can do everything from soup to nuts, like not only help your parents to downsize, but get the house ready for a sale if that's
There are resources
involved.
out there that can help you do
Yes.
that? You don't have to do it all by yourself?
No, you don't. There are people that can come in and remove junk, people that can clean a house after it's been emptied,
Really?
people that can set up a new residence for your parents. You may be the manager of that, but there are resources, and some you may choose to use some and not others. But if you're in the throes of raising your own family, or if you have your own career,
Right.
one of the big hurdles is, do you let your parents sort of tread water while you're trying to figure it out?
Yes.
That's probably not the best thing for you or for them.
When you have this talk, you've always talked about the idea of emphasizing not what they're giving up, but what they're going to. Talk a little bit about that.
If you see that your mom is struggling because the laundry's one floor away,
Right.
and maybe she's always done the laundry, and that's a role that she has in the household, or maybe your dad has been, the handyman around the house, but you realize that the patchwork that he did on the drywall looks like it was his first patchwork job ever. Maybe you ought to talk to them about what they're gaining. Because if he still wants to putter around and use tools, maybe he can do so without having to do that in a house maintenance role. Maybe he can do it for fun, but not having to maintain the house.
What do you mean do it for fun? Are there ways that he can indulge that in a retirement community?
Oh, sure. Yes. Many retirement communities have groups, committees that are involved with anything from woodworking to groundskeeping. So and you can do it when you want to.
So if you want to garden, you can garden.
You have to.
You can
Yes.
garden in a retirement community?
Or you can give it up. If the gardens become too much, and the only reason you're gardening is because your children want you to can tomatoes every year, then maybe you can give up gardening by moving too.
So is a way to open this conversation to give them scenarios to actually say, how will you deal with this, or is that overstepping?
No, I think it's good to give scenarios. I've encountered families who thought, well, if something happens to me, I'll just live with my daughter. But then you find out that the daughter is not really ready or even willing necessarily to have that type of relationship. Maybe there won't be enough privacy for two, women in the same household. Maybe there won't be enough privacy for two couples in the same household. Maybe your daughter's house has stairs to use the shower. There may be things that you haven't really thought about.
So do you put those out there and say, Mom, are you thinking that you might be living with me? I mean, that sounds uncomfortable.
It may be uncomfortable, but if it's not said, it's going to become more uncomfortable, and it's going to be the elephant in the room. So it's a part of the planning process. So you want to bring the expectations out into the open, find out if they match.
Yours and your parents.
If they don't match, say, okay, so in the scenario that you can no longer do stairs, what do you and Dad have in mind? In the scenario that something happens to you, who will do the grocery shopping and the cooking for Dad, because that's his most detestable chore on earth? Do you want him to see him eating Hungry Man dinners for the rest of his life? So you want to talk about the different what-ifs, because what-ifs can happen to everybody at any age, but we become more at risk the higher we are in age.
So if my parents have expectations that I don't know about, how do I get them to talk about that?
You have to be very open and honest with them, and point blank ask them.
Really?
Why not? What is your plan if something happens to you? What is your plan for Dad? Or Dad, what is your plan for Mom if something happens to you? Just ask them. They're likely to tell you.
Really?
Really.
So it might just be a matter of opening the conversation. They might be anxious to talk about this?
They might be anxious to talk about it. They might be anxious from not having talked about it too. So you may not...
The secret kind of a thing, that it's the shared secret.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and then there may be, if there really are numerous trouble spots that you see in your parents' lifestyle, or a single parent, maybe you already have lost a parent, then is it too late to have a meaningful conversation with them? If it is too late for that meaningful conversation, meaning in a cognitive capacity,
Okay.
then you may need to step in, and in that situation, you need to become the decision maker. You need to let them be a part of the decision, but if they are having cognitive troubles, whether it's forgetfulness or change in judgment, then you may need to do that and be the provider of choices.
Provider of choices, I like that.
So, Dad, I've come up with 2 different ideas that I think will help you, since the house seems to be falling down around your ears. This is choice A, this is choice B, and we're going to help you get there. What do you think? What do you like the best?
Okay, so just don't automatically take over. So give us 3 big pieces of advice, sort of guiding ideas about having those conversations, because I think most of us are resistant to them.
One is just pony up and be an adult and think about what's right for your parents.
Okay.
So maybe it's awkward to talk about certain things, but even a parent sometimes will come to a point in their life where they actually need you instead of you needing them.
That's pretty uncomfortable.
Yes, it is. So that's that's a one piece of advice.
Right.
It's going to be uncomfortable, but you may have to parent your child. 2 is to really bring out the expectations of each other out in the open. See if they line up. Your mom and dad may even have expectations that differ from each other, let alone your third expectation.
Really?
Yeah. And sometimes it's good too to bring in others. If there really is something that is unsafe, or if you're worrying about your parents on an every other day basis or a daily basis, then you may need to bring in your siblings, maybe someone professional. Maybe they have respect for clergy.
Well, that's interesting.
Or
idea.
maybe they have respect for their physician, or even their attorney. You may want to bring someone else into it if you're worrying about their own personal well-being or safety.
So bring out expectations, bring in outside resources if necessary, or other people. What's the third big idea?
Well, the first one was step up to the plate.
Step up. Oh, yes. Notice how I avoided that, too?
Yes. But definitely, you've got to, the ball's in your court. If it's coming down to having the talk with your parents, the ball's in your court, really.
Really? Okay. So that's the third piece of advice. Recognize when it is and step up to the plate. So where could people go for more information?
Well, I always like to welcome people to the Duncaster.org website. People can call me if they, wish to have, information on even professional resources. We even have a listing of those on our website for different groups that will help with downsizing and moving and whatnot.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking a little bit today about how to initiate a difficult conversation with your parents about moving to a retirement community. Thank you for joining us.